All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the absolute biggest corporate strategy questions out there, and we're going to look at it through the lens of a massive global powerhouse, Unilever. It's the ultimate business showdown of focus versus scale. We're talking explosive growth, hidden complexities, and the downright agonizing choices companies have to make just to survive. Because as we're going to see, in the corporate world, gravity always catches up with you. Think of this as an epic story of a giant battling its own success. And trust me, the lessons here apply to way more than just mega corporations. So, get comfortable.
Think about your morning routine for a second. The toothpaste you used, the soap in the shower, maybe the tea you drank with breakfast. Chances are, this one corporate giant had a hand in it. We are talking about reach on a scale that is honestly hard to wrap your head around. Billions, yes, with a B, of users across the globe interact with this company's products every single day. For decades, that sheer volume was treated like an impenetrable fortress. The logic was completely unquestioned. If you can reach everyone, everywhere, all the time, well, you win the game.
But here's the catch. To achieve that kind of global dominance, you need stuff, a lot of stuff. We're talking about an endless, fast-paced stream of categories. Soap, ice cream, shampoo, tea, detergent, skincare, household products. The list is dizzying. You could practically build a small country out of their portfolio. In fact, when you're a conglomerate operating at this scale, you might actually accidentally acquire a new brand of soap on a Tuesday and not even notice. It's not just one business. It's practically hundreds of mini empires operating under one massive corporate umbrella.
So this brings us to a really fascinating question, and it's basically the central mystery we are unpacking today. Can a company actually get too big, too complex, and too diversified to operate efficiently? When exactly does the superpower of massive scale transform into a paralyzing burden? It's a super counterintuitive thought, right? We are so deeply conditioned to believe that bigger is always better. But in the real world of corporate strategy, mass inevitably creates drag.
Let's start breaking this down with Act 1, the burden of maximum scale.
Which leads us directly into Act 2. The complexity monster awakens, bringing with it some truly unsustainable operational weight.
You see, for the longest time, the golden rule in consumer goods was simply that more equaled better. More brands meant more markets, and that meant more revenue. Simple, right? But it's kind of like an overgrown garden. This endless expansion quietly gave birth to a monster. And it didn't happen overnight. It crept in brand by brand. Think about what it takes to support just one product line. Now multiply that by hundreds. Every single new brand demands its own packaging, its own pricing, supply chain, and marketing strategy. You end up in this tragic reality where budgets get completely fragmented. Truly great, innovative products end up starved of funding and left to die because leadership is just too distracted trying to keep dozens of mediocre legacy brands afloat. The operational weight becomes absolutely crushing.
It all comes down to a brutal tug of war right at the heart of the business. On one side, you have the intense gravitational pull of scale. Scale is this heavy anvil that gives you unmatched distribution strength, terrifying bargaining leverage with your suppliers, and incredibly diversified revenue. On the other side, you have the sharp bullseye of focus, which gives you operational efficiency, strategic discipline, and top-tier innovation. The reality is, companies desperately want both. They want the anvil and the bullseye. But these goals inherently conflict. Every ounce of scale you add directly erodes your focus.
And that brings us to Act 3, the agony of the cut, where it's time to start pruning the portfolio.
To actually slay this complexity monster, leaders have to deploy a really painful weapon: portfolio rationalization. It's an agonizing pivot from aggressive empire building to ruthless pruning. Look, growth through endless expansion eventually hits a wall of diminishing returns, and the only way out is to start cutting away the very limbs that helped build the empire in the first place. Portfolio rationalization is basically the strategy of concentrating your investment on products with stronger growth, better margins, or a much clearer competitive advantage, instead of just spreading your resources everywhere. It means leadership has to stop blindly throwing money at weaker brands just because they've been around for 50 years.
It boils down to a brutally simple framework. Think of it as the ultimate corporate judgment day. Every single brand in the company's vast portfolio gets marched out and faces one of four absolute fates. Do we keep it? Do we actively pour money into it to grow it? Do we box it up and sell it off to a competitor? Or do we simply remove it entirely, discontinuing production forever? It sounds super neat on a whiteboard for sure, but strategically? Deciding the fate of a massive business unit filled with real revenue and real employees is one of the hardest things a corporate leader will ever have to do.
Now, if a company actually pulls this off and survives the pruning process, the clouds part.
Suddenly, marketing efficiency skyrockets because you no longer have 50 internal brands cannibalizing each other for the exact same ad dollars. Operational simplification massively untangles the supply chain, saving absolute millions in logistics. Research and development teams aren't sprayed paper thin anymore. They get laser-focused on high-potential blockbusters. Overall profitability immediately shoots up by shedding those low-margin distractors. And perhaps most importantly, the company regains a clearer strategic identity. They finally remember exactly what they want to be when they grow up.
So, you might be wondering, why don't companies just do this all the time? Well, because the agony is so real. Executing these cuts means navigating an absolute minefield of emotional resistance. You're talking about firing people who have worked on a brand for decades. You're angering grandmothers who have loyally bought the same exact bar of soap for 40 years. Then there's the terrifying uncertainty of selling a brand that might just become a massive hit for someone else down the road. Retail partners get totally spooked, throwing fits because they demand wide portfolio breadth on their shelves. The broader market might even perceive the cuts as a desperate sign of weakness. And physically untangling all those supply chains, that carries massive execution risk.
Moving into Act 4, adapting to consumer pressures, because the landscape is changing fast. Despite how painful it is to cut brands, the pressure to make these decisions is intensifying rapidly. The ground is literally shifting beneath the feet of these corporate giants. The market today is absolutely unforgiving of bloated, slow-moving operations. We are seeing this constant emergence of agile, hyper-focused challenger brands, kind of like modern Davids taking devastating potshots at Goliath's castle. Combine that with rapidly evolving consumer preferences, a total revolution in digital commerce, and a massive shift toward premium, health, and conscious sustainability trends, suddenly investors are pounding their fists on the table, demanding operational discipline. Scale alone, it's just not enough to hide behind anymore.
But hold on. As companies rush in with their pruning shears, they have to step very carefully. If you cut too much, you're suddenly walking a tightrope without a net. Diversification was your armor. If you overfocus on just one or two categories and the market turns, you are entirely exposed to sudden downturns, relentless competitive attacks, or just unexpected shifts in what consumers want. That massive portfolio used to provide vital resilience during economic winters. So the true north here isn't just about becoming a smaller company. The goal is to become a more lethal, strategically coherent one.
Finally, Act 5, the ultimate strategy lesson to take away from all this.
Let's bring this all together and summarize the hero's journey of our corporate protagonist here. Axing beloved brands isn't simply an exercise in spreadsheet cost-cutting. If you're just cutting costs without actually improving your position in the market, you aren't doing strategy, you're just shrinking. True portfolio rationalization transforms your strategic coherence. Like we've seen, scale creates massive opportunity, but it adds crippling operational weight. Growth without discipline is just bloating. You absolutely have to play favorites because not all products deserve equal investment. At its core, portfolio management is just the ruthless reallocation of resources to where they create actual long-term value.
And that brings us to a really profound realization. Sometimes strategy is about deciding what not to keep. It completely flips our usual capitalistic mindset upside down. We are constantly taught to acquire, to build, to just add more and more to our plates. But true strategy is very often defined by the things you bravely choose to destroy, to sell off, or just walk away from in order to protect your core mission.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question that goes way beyond the boardroom of a massive company like Unilever. Look at your own business, your career, or even your daily life right now. What are you holding on to that is adding complexity instead of value? Where in your own world do you need to stop expanding and start simplifying? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.